What's up, everyone? Happy Wednesday, and welcome to the game on Pack State Live, the show where we talk about all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of. We do have some shenanigans for you today because we're going to debate the merits of GRC tools a little bit, but also talk about GRC in general. So super excited for that. A couple of things. Matt is at Security Boot Camp, I think doing a little bit of hackery stuff, if memory serves me, on the agenda. So that should be exciting, but he will not be here on the show. Before we jump in, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Don't forget to watch on PackState's YouTube. And I'm seeing some more posts come out about PackState Beyond. And when we start doing that, usually means we're pushing towards some goals, which means we might be running out of space. So make sure you lock that down, and let's jump right in. Before we jump in, though, and I totally forgot my own agenda change, but before we jump in, I want to cover a couple of things at Ignite. Ignite's going down right now. We have a huge crew there, but I've been following what's coming out of it. I want to cover two key things that I think you can take action on pretty much immediately. So the first one is going to be passkeys and authenticator. So this preview feature came out a while ago. And if you're using security keys, you pretty much know how this works. The limitation has always been physical security keys, so Microsoft is solving for that. So device-bound soft passkeys are coming to Microsoft Authenticator, which means for your Entra account, you can have that contained passkey without needing to distribute security keys. So you can get that phishing-resistant authentication out of the same app you've already been using. So definitely check that out. I shared it on LinkedIn. You can go find it there. Another cool thing I wanted to share is this new feature that they're calling administrative protection that's going to come out in Windows 11. And Matt and I always talk about the local admin gap and how you should get rid of local admin. So administrative protection allows you to be a local admin, but only when you need to be one. So it's just in time elevation for accounts that are a local admin. So definitely something to check out. Keep following us on LinkedIn. I'm sharing as much relevant stuff as I can as it comes out. So it's really cool stuff. With that in mind, what are we talking about today that is not Microsoft or Ignite? We're talking about GRC, which is governance, risk, and compliance. The G word has finally made its way into frameworks, right? It's a core function of cybersecurity. So we're going to talk about GRC. But more importantly, we're going to dive into sort of the tactical execution of GRC. We're going to get a little bit nerdy with Joe Frisk, our VP of GRC here at PackState, in a little bit. Talk about the merits of some tools, maybe why some businesses aren't using tools, or maybe where you introduce tools and where they provide value. So we're going to do that here in a minute. But first, let's hear from Robin Harris.
Are you ready?
Let's talk about time management and making use of cycles. And we are in an age where there's always more to do than we have time. And one of the things that we can get in the habit of doing is trying to do too much, too fast, all at the same time. And so what I have found to be really, really, really helpful is to work with cycles. And by that, I mean, as we're coming into where we're winding up this quarter, right? We're going to wind up 2024 and we're going to go into 2025. And it's really a good thing to look at scoping your work, whether it's your audit work, whether it's your security work, your marketing work. Look at how you can operate in segments of quarters. Quarters it's like the seasons. We want to work with cycles. And also what we want to do is there are natural cycles to everyone's business. And you want to tap into doing the right thing at the right time. And that means you need to understand your natural cycles within your business. There might be really good times to start something new. And there might be times where it's just absolutely awful. And I know with audits, there's a cycle where you want to really be grooming your controls and looking at them and refreshing them and leveling them up. And then there's a time where you want to be evaluating, there's a time where you want to be assessing, and then you get into an internal audit and an external audit. All that happens in separate cycles. And you need to be very clear that this happens during this time, and you give yourself the ample space and the grace to do things right. Because we're in a society where we're rushing. We're rushing, we're rushing, we're rushing. And when we rush, we make mistakes. When we rush and we put too much on our plate, then when an opportunity comes along, we've stressed ourselves so thin that we can't even take advantage of opportunities when they come our way. And so I'm going to just invite, as we're coming out of this year and going into the next year, to really look at how we can become time masters, how we can really leverage our time without making ourselves crazy, overworked, stressed, trying to do too much, and become really extraordinary in how we tap into the natural seasons of our business, the natural seasons of our life. There might be times when, say, like it's summertime and the kids are out of school. That might not be a time when you need to be working 60, 80 hours a week. That might be a very bad time to take on those kinds of projects. But then they're going back to school, blah, blah, blah. Maybe that's a time where you can start putting in those extra hours or doing deep dives into things where you might have to put a little more time into work. What I'm just saying is we need to honor that we are humans and we have to work with time. Time is a limiter for us, and we have to respect how we operate within time, because when we become time masters, it's almost as if time will stretch for us and time will become more pliable. And all of a sudden, when you know how to work with your cycles, you can take 2 hours of focus time and get 6 hours worth of work done. But you got to be a time master to pull that off. So I'm going to say 2025, that is a really, really, really good New Year's resolution to become a time master in your business and in your personal life.
Time to level up. Level up.
A time master. Man, that's a great resolution. Yeah, some more brilliant words from Robin Harris. And I believe it's about audit season, so she's on y'all are on like the cusp of the fun part, right? But I digress. Joe, welcome to the show. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about GRC. Let's let you drive.
Excellent. Thanks, Dom, and hello, everyone. Nice to meet everyone today. My name is Joe Frisk. I am the VP of Governance, Risk, and Compliance here at PAX 8. And I'm here up to today to talk a little bit about a very exciting topic, governance, risk, and compliance. So wanted to talk a little bit about today how we want to look at evaluating solutions that help enable GRC and kind of how we go about doing that. And before we do, I wanted to take a few minutes and introduce myself from some of my background. So we'll bring that up. Thank you. Uh, so just to give a little bit more about myself, I've been in the industry for about 25 plus years, been both IT and security. Uh, just previous to PAX 8, I was with a company called Alorica, where I was their chief information security officer. I was a chief information security officer at Cognizant, the global head of GRC for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and prior to that, did some consulting for Accenture, and I had my own consulting firm as well, where I consulted for a number of the major financial services companies in the U.S. And before that, I was with Bank of America, where I was an executive over security and risk. So I have had a great career with GRC. It's one of my passions, and I'm really glad to be able to bring some of my perspective here to this group. So thank you. Thank you for the invite. So today I wanted
Yeah. I
to
think GRC used to get a bad rap around being the boring part of security, right? Um, so I wanted to throw that out, and this is a no look pass. I wanted to throw that out early because I wholeheartedly disagree, especially as you dive into recent framework changes and look back. Security doesn't happen without governance, right? There's just no way. You cannot have a built, mature program if you don't govern it. So this is a really important topic to dive into, and we're talking with a lot of partners about building governance around their super fancy stack of tools, right?
I completely agree. I think that from a GRC perspective, we are the connection point across the company. We are the glue that holds together a lot of the conversations that occur uh, of all the cross-functional teams with legal, human resources, IT, finance, procurement, et cetera. We really do bring that all together, and we it really helps to incorporate all of the security requirements that we need to get driven through by making those partnerships and facilitating them internally, but then also externally. We're very much focused on relationship building, which is incredibly important. So uh, I think you're absolutely right there from a governance perspective. Uh, I also think from an engagement, we're also the key for elevating trust. Which is one of the reasons why our organization here at Pax8 is trust and security. We want to elevate the assurance of our partners, our third parties, our clients, the people that we do business with, our auditors, whoever it is that is engaging with us. We want to have elevated confidence. And the way we do that is we in GRC help bring transparency and uh, visibility into our program, our overall program with the company. And we do that through governance. So, with
Awesome.
that said, um, oops, go ahead.
No, you go. I
So,
was just
I was
saying that's great.
oh, good. Well, I was thinking about GRC from a perspective of, how we grew up as an organization. And I think that, security became a major player in organizations that started to become more of a peer of IT rather than a subset of IT. And I think as that began to occur over the years, we got to see the importance and its role and interconnections. And I think the enterprise risk management teams, our corporate compliance teams, all had a hand in what today is now GRC, especially when we focus on cyber. The discipline of cyber and security has become so significant that it needs its own arm and its own arm to make sure it's connected across the organization, as we talked about. Um, it's in my opinion, an organization that evolves, and it evolves through not just the maturity of the security program itself, but the overall organization. It's really important, I believe, to have the business strategy really intertwined with what we do with GRC. And as an example to that, if the business is looking to do acquisitions or the businesses are looking to expand or have new products or acquire new technology, it's incumbent upon the GRC team to be plugged in as early as possible to bring the right players into those discussions early on. And I think a lot of uh, when we talked about security, when in, in relation to that, the overall security programs grew more out of IT. So it's really interesting to see, in my opinion, how GRC grew up, which is really kind of an offshoot of the enterprise cross-functional teams that really needed to engage and understand security better. Whereas with the core function of security being security operations, security architecture, the very IT focused areas, uh, that's where I think that the initial like investments were made as from a solutioning perspective. So what we find is the tools are much more mature. The practitioners that use those tools are much more technology focused. They have the experience with technology. When we start to look at GRC, we have practitioners that have backgrounds that are stronger in risk. Now, they also have security backgrounds, of course, as well, but their real strengths are stakeholder management and engagement, facilitation of discussion. And so I think today, when we talk a little bit about the solutions, we keep that in mind because I believe that that's really what drove to where we are today from a maturity level perspective. Uh, so I think with that said, I know that Matt couldn't be here today, but I know that he pre-recorded a few questions for us, and I would love to start off with one of his first questions if we could.
Hey, Joe, and everybody else watching. I am so sorry I can't make the show, so I've decided to make the show virtually. To much of everybody's chagrin. No, I tease. I'm in Phoenix, technically. I mean, right now I'm not, obviously, when I'm recording it. But when you're seeing this, I'm in Phoenix. I'm actually doing the security boot camp with about 75, 80 partners and MSPs. We're doing a really immersive thing, and hopefully I'll be on stage right now talking about the lessons we learned, not just, man, Matt sucks at preparation and needs to be way better at putting hours into these things. No, I tease. Great to see everybody here, and today we're here to discuss something kind of near and dear and also somewhat burgeoning, but has been around a long time. I know I just double spoke, but we're talking about GRCs. I first had my first experience with a GRC platform, right? Governance, risk, and compliance is its own statement, but a GRC platform when I was trying to get my SOC 2. And the assessor said, here's a place to go put all your documentation that you're already using and the evidence that we're going to ask for and a way to collaborate with everybody, and this is going to change your world. The first question I have for everybody, and what I'd like to ask you, Joe, is has a GRC platform been a help, or has it generally been a hindrance? And is it only valuable when you're working with that assessor, or does it in some way benefit you from an operational perspective? Love to hear your thoughts on this.
Thank you, Matt. I know you're not here. I know you're in two places at once today, but I think that's a relevant question for sure. And from a GRC perspective, um, the complexity in GRC to bring together our policy frameworks to our compliance capabilities to ensuring continuity with new regulations or changes in regulations, as well as making sure that we're aligned to contractual commitments, and at the same time identifying and managing risks properly in the organization. And that complexity, I think, is where it becomes really attractive to adopt a tool and start wanting to use it and wanting to use it right. And so to answer your question, from a practitioner perspective, I think we have a number of tools in the market that I've been exposed to and tried to use. And I think that there's a lot of shortcomings with the tools just in general. I think that we've become so accustomed to leveraging Microsoft Office type technology that it's so easy to use. It's so easy to navigate and scroll and put our information in one place that you can see it. I think one of the challenges we have with GRC solutions specifically is we need technology that can facilitate workflows, approval workflows, from a perspective of maintaining uh, exceptions to policies or inquiries of what's going on. So or even facilitating policy publication. So a lot of those workflows are not typically intuitive in a GRC tech tool that we typically see today. A lot of times we see a technology that's overly complex. It's very difficult to customize. Uh, you usually have a technology person assisting with building a tech solution rather than a hands-on GRC practitioner who really knows the day to day. And I'll use a kind of an example. Um, from a policy perspective, one of the things that we were looking at here is how do we refresh and get our policies up to date and align to what's the newest frameworks and the new requirements in the industry and get us ahead, considering AI and a lot of the emerging technology and trends. How do we effectively do that? And one of the thought processes was let's use a GRC tool, and it is incredibly valuable from a perspective of having a place where we can facilitate discussions with an auditor or have a place where we can create linkages, but to be able to facilitate a conversation with a business partner or human resources on a specific section of a policy that's really more aligned to them, like an acceptable use policy or an IT development standard. I think that the technology isn't flexible enough to cater to different personas in that way. It isn't very audience specific. And so what we've done is we do a lot of our work in Excel. I mean, I spend a lot of my life in Excel. I get I load and get
Me
the
too.
information into a GRC tool, so it's there. But then from that perspective, when I need to actually have a discussion with someone, it's so difficult to navigate the screens and just make it so you're sharing and uptime, real time collaboration is very difficult. So it becomes one of those tools that is inflexibility is good for structure from a perspective of linkages and frameworks and compliance and black and white decision making. But when collaboration is going on with key stakeholders and key contributors, it just isn't it isn't typically flexible enough. And I know there's some tools come up and coming that are trying to produce some of that flexibility. Today, we see very expensive solutions. I've worked in enterprises that we spent multiple millions of dollars and ended up deciding, let's go take an Excel spreadsheet. It's just much faster. It's much easier um, to do that. So I think that's kind of one of the areas there from that perspective. And I think um, also, something simple as a risk discussion. So, policies and
Yeah,
compliance is probably the core competency, but as we start to branch out and we look at how do we effectively manage risk in our cyber programs, and how do we take a tool and have it help us manage risks? Well, you facilitate discussion and you identify risks in either risk committees or through just day-to-day business as usual or incident activity or what have you, and that gets recorded, and that's actually pretty easy to do in a tool. You record your risk. It helps you with as sophisticated as you can get with risk matrix from a probability and impact, and the
sure.
calculations are fantastic, and you get great graphics. But if you need to facilitate a conversation on how does senior leadership want to look at this risk at a macro level versus a practitioner or an auditor or a control owner? They're all different views. They're all different characteristics. So you may look at something that you would share with an executive that data loss protection is a risk in the organization, and there are multiple components to that. We want to make sure we focus on unstructured data from, files on a file share or a SharePoint site to structured data in our data warehouse or a database. And when you try to manage that risk, you want to be able to have the conversation with the executive committees and make real-time prioritization changes and commitments that have been made in those discussions, as well as resource allocations, et cetera. But when you turn your chair and need to talk to the individuals who are helping manage the risk treatment plans or the remediation progress, the terminology is different, the approaches are different, the level of detail that we need to manage is significantly different. And so I think that's kind of one of the challenges there. And the only other one that really comes to mind over and over again is when we need to have the same conversation with auditors. And so we want to have conversation with auditors. There's a lot of linkage back to the frameworks, the policy. It also starts to go into evidence, starts to go into trust but verify concepts. And so from an evidence perspective, it's a great tool to load evidence into, but it's not necessarily a great tool to collaborate with auditors on. So we typically will download that evidence and then send it out to auditors or share it. Wouldn't it be great to have a GRC tool that you could have the auditor go to a link, see the specific evidence you want, the evidence stays securely in your platform, and then their access expires? To me, that facilitation is key. Not only do you know you've protected the sharing of that information, but it's in a tool that can do that as well. So I think there are so many different areas of this that we could
Well,
explore.
and if you're working with an auditor, you're sharing incredibly sensitive information typically. Like if you're going through your SOC 2, you're really in the nitty gritty of how you protect things and how you manage things and how your business operates. So it just seems natural that a tool like a GRC platform should just have a mode of, hey, the CRO is logging in and needs to see just the stuff that matters to the CRO and only that level of detail. So it sounds like in an ideal state, you'd be able to create that for the executive, the auditor, the practitioner, so that they're just seeing and able to act on what's within their role and care, right?
That's absolutely correct. And a lot of times we'll use document management technology that's separate from a GRC tool to help facilitate that because of the shortcomings. Um, I think today the focus has been on the insulated function of GRC and has a blind spot for all of the cross engagement and a blind spot for the collaboration that's needed. And we have, in order to be successful today, it does take a lot of contributors, a lot of subject matter experts from all different areas to be involved. The access rights management components of a GRC tool, I think are limited. The usability is as well. Like when we start thinking about if I want to have a user submit an exception request or just engage with the system, it's not real. It's really more meant for someone who's doing the analysis on the GRC analyst type person,
Sure.
that role. So I think the view from a usability perspective kind of has that blind spot in mind. And just thinking this through, I know that Matt had a second question um, related to this, I believe. And so maybe we could go to that question and we can talk a little bit more.
GRC tools could be a mixed bag, and while I'm unsure of your exact answers before this, I have my theories as well of where we're going, and I'd love to pose this question as well. When you have a GRC platform, Joe, that is way more integrated, when it's deeply tied into all the tools you use, they're pulling from your cloud native applications, they're pulling from your EDRs, they're pulling from all those things and gathering evidence and bringing it to a place to meet the evidentiary requirements for those assessments for the frameworks you're trying to meet. Does that change that paradigm? Are we now seeing GRC platforms as a time saver and in a very valuable member of our team for meeting that ever-changing complex requirement? I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think that that's an excellent question. So there's a really interesting point that I think about when I think about evidence collection. And I think historically we've been in a mode of point in time evidence, and that's kind of how we operated. GRC is quickly moving to a place of being more continuous compliance. And as we do that, we need our evidence to be more up to date. In order to facilitate that the best way possible, we need a tool that has integration and automated collection of evidence information, uh, metrics around security compliance, whether that's compliance to security stack across the endpoints, uh, whether that's compliance for terminated users in the environment, like what does their access footprint look like? Collecting that at point in time, not only would that decrease the turnaround and the effort that it takes to get that information, it eliminates that stale concept where you perform your internal audits at a point in time. It's harder to just jump right back in and check any time, like where are we today. And I think as we start to evolve a GRC program and solutions start to catch up, um, I would see that there's a lot more integration where that comes in. Integration with tools like ServiceNow for workflow, where we see a lot of or Workday for HR, or ServiceNow for workflow from the IT perspective, or incident management solutions. Uh,
Sure.
Especially a lot of the larger solutions. We also see integration with things like Slack and communication channels. Where we have, hey, this threshold of what we were expecting from a from a key risk indicator or a KRI. Um, I want to know that this risk is elevated now. that the situation the risk was in a month ago may be completely different today. And having that governance will help us do that, which will allow us to respond much faster. So I absolutely think that the integration component is really key, not just from a workflow, but also an engagement. And a good example of this, with a GRC tool I was trying to use the other day, we were trying to integrate. We had the advertisement of we integrate with Slack. So that's fantastic. So we set up the connection, we tested it out, and we said this is not working. Oh well, we only integrate with Slack when it's not a private channel. Well, we're in security.
Oh.
Of course, it's a private channel. so, so, there's that. Diving in a little bit deeper to our requirements we may have to define them a little bit more, and we may not have had that experience before. So that gives you one example. So from an evidence perspective, I think that's really important. Also, when we engage with developers, we're starting to find out that we find the people that we engage with, the control owners, really like to work in the tools that they're used to, whatever that might be, right? Jira could be an example where they're managing their workload of fixing things. Well, if you're tracking remediation in a GRC tool, if you don't have that integration, then you're tracking now in two places. So having that back and
Sure.
forth, and I'll pick on the GRC solutions one more time, but there was this concept of let's have some messaging back and forth with developers. I want to be able to ask where you are with your remediation progress. So the answer was, oh, we absolutely can do that. We can set up a two-way communication channel. It will automatically ask the developers what to do. So great. So we set it up. We sent the first request over and said, how's progress with this remediation? The developer said, it's going great. A month later, we sent the same message and got no reply. So we decided to escalate, like what's going on? Well, we found out that the functionality only works once. It only worked the first time. If you needed to do another engagement, you have to set up another, channel. And so it's kind of an interesting thing is things that you may make assumptions of don't. Really thoroughly test solutions, I think, is really important. Um, and I think that, having a good workflow in place before adopting a solution is really important because that way you can fail over to that while the technology catches up. So I think that, those are some of my initial thoughts.
Well, that's really interesting. I think to me, what you described is taking evidence, making it near real time, right? As close to real time as is reasonable, which is really cool. And I think, looking at it at a macro level, it takes the whole concept of, we'll just pick on SOC 2 a little more. SOC 2, those auditors are doing their best to look at a trailing 12 months. But you can do it to the letter and perhaps not the spirit. But if we're really trying to be effective in our GRC, we want to know about risk in real time. That's kind of the whole idea of that compliance. So you can really follow it to the spirit by knowing, hey, our tool found this threshold, it raised the ServiceNow ticket, sent it to the GRC analyst or sent it to the product team who's going to deal with it, and then collect that evidence back, which now you're really showing that for that trailing 12 months, not only did you meet the controls you said you were, you in real time were dealing with exceptions or incidents that cause some fallout, right? Which is massively powerful just from the aspect of securing the business.
I mean, that's a really good point. And you triggered another thought, which is cyber insurance. We're seeing much
Yeah,
more activity in that area around those that adopt continuous compliance tend to get better rates. And there are some cyber insurance companies now that are starting to drive to having their own version of near real time kind of updates
sure.
rather than that attestation based approach that we historically saw. And I think it's important, when we talk about GRC, when we think about ourselves and really evaluating ourselves and maturing ourselves, there's the importance of maintaining like where we are today, because it can be very different. Um, but I also think third parties. There's such a real focus too on how well our third parties are performing. And I know we have point in time monitoring capabilities that try to monitor scores and monitor public information around breaches. But if you had a really critical third party to have at least some of the key controls, and I'll give an example. In one of the roles I was in, I was responsible for the customer facing arm for other companies. And so the the compliance of, say, the customer service agent that is engaging to the world and has access to the company X, it's incredibly important to know that what they're operating on in real time is consistently compliant. When the compliance degrades, knowing that immediately rather than during the points in time during audit. So the GRC solutions from a governance perspective, that integration to pull in information, that information is there. It's out there. It's available. So consuming it and using it is really valuable. Today, I think a GRC practitioner would, on an ongoing basis, download data from different sources, put it in Excel, aggregate it up, and try to manually put that into PowerPoint presentations or messaging,
Sure.
and then try to engage to drive compliance. How fantastic would it be to automate that in such a way that there's there's just near real time. It reduces the effort of the practitioner, where the practitioner now, instead of focusing on finding the issues, they now can focus on driving remediation, and they can drive risk reduction. And I think that today's environment, we're well more than 50% on the identification side.
I like it.
I
You almost want them to become a time master, right?
Right, I was thinking about Robin's excellent recommendations there. So I think that's good. I know that Matt had one other question for us, so maybe we should take that one as well.
Okay, so we've heard a couple of discussions, hopefully, and I'm assuming all of the answers were fantastic because I've met you and worked with you. But I'm curious, in your overall arching answer, would you say if you were talking to an MSP, a managed service provider serving hundreds of clients, let's say, would you advise them to go down the path of getting their policies in order and the evidence they plan to gather and the way they plan to meet compliance before engaging a GRC? Or would you rather them go ahead and pick a GRC and start to work within the confines of the way those function today? Just curious on your thoughts on that one as well.
That's such a good question as well. Um, first I'll answer the question directly with process first. In my opinion, is always easier to automate. So, uh, any maturity scale recommends establishing a process, making it repeatable, and then looking at automation. To me, um, that helps flush out a lot of things. I think some of the challenges are with maybe smaller companies, or startup companies that are developing the GRC model, and they're looking for the GRC tools to help with that. And the immediate assumption is, if this is a GRC tool, they must have the experience. They must have the ability to facilitate maturity in our space. I don't think that's true. I think that the tools certainly can help, and I don't want to completely. I think there's a lot of value, um, but I think there's an element of being self-aware around what level of maturity not only the program is, but GRC, and developing the policy framework. In my opinion, is the fundamental and the foundation. And I've stepped into a number of different GRC areas when I was consulting, that I saw that the policy was neglected. I mean, I get that it's not an exciting thing to do, is to write policy, and some people aren't as excited about it as I. But it's so important because it drives the entire program of security, and not just security within the security organization, but across the entire company. It sets the management direction, it sets the expectations, and if done properly, it really sets up the audit to be able um, to really be prescriptive around how well you're meeting. And it can also be used as a tool to drive investment, which I think is important. I think if we think about policy from just not just compliance, but driving the level of maturity we expect us to operate at, and then identifying where we're not operating, will help us prioritize where we're going to invest our money, where we're going to invest our funds. So I think it's really really important to focus on at least having that foundation in place, even if it means driving out a process first that is somewhat manual. And one of the things that we did kind of here at PAX 8 is we kind of took some of the GRC components and we said, let's kind of define out what those steps look like. And so I'm going to go ahead and share with you just kind of a quick illustration from the policy framework perspective. So we went and said, what are all of the things that we need to do, for example, to manage and maintain policies. So we will have, efforts before we have to publish the policy, to collaborate and, uh, creating the documents and collaborating and tracking, and then we go into publication and then post publication. And so we looked at all of those steps in that process. And we then said, well, what technology or tools do we use today in our portfolio that helps facilitate those steps? And then if we wanted to look at adoption of a GRC technology for those specific areas, this will help us build the requirements. And so from that, we start to track, okay, let's review this GRC solution and see, where does it meet the I would call them now requirements at this point, but these specific areas, that would actually help us understand, we're using Smartsheets or SharePoint, or even started to use a GRC solution today. Where do we want the target to be? And I think that really helps a lot, because then going into the GRC discussions, it instead of the GRC uh, directing the program, the GRC solution directing the program, it becomes the life cycle management of each of the capabilities that direct the program. And so in this kind of illustration we have here on policy framework, we've done something very similar on a second. Uh, I'm sorry, on the next slide, we have we've continued that to show a little bit more around the publication and the post publication tasks that need to be done around managing a policy. We've also done this, if we go to the next slide one more time, we've started to do this with the compliance process itself as well. The planning, the pre-work, the actual assessment and internal audit activities, all the way through to external auditors coming on site to managing that process through fruition. Um, this really helps kind of build that out, not just from a how to figure out what we want the GRC solution to do. And in some cases, we may very well say that I don't really want a GRC solution to take the place of certain capabilities. I still want to put my policy in a Word document and publish it in PDF, and I want to do the collaboration in you know in a technology that's more like Word. Um, and so I think that this actually helps kind of identify that throughout as well, and it makes a really good conscious decision around what you want to use which tool for. Um, we did the same type of thing for risk management, and you can keep doing the same type of activity for all of the capabilities that are incorporated within GRC. And we think of this as just kind of a tool that helps. Now, I thought that maybe it would be interesting for if anyone was interested in this tool, we have made it available to you. There's a link below that can get you to the tool, and it's really just to kind of help get some thought process going around. Okay, these are the different components that we have within our GRC function. How do we detail out the I would call them life cycles, or numbers of steps that would have to go into each of those areas? How do we define those out? And then what are we going to just thoughtfully want to either automate or align with a GRC solution? And I think that that's one way to do that. You don't The organization doesn't have to be fully mature to adopt a solution, but I would caution the uh, area of buy the solution and use that to mature. And I think that that's something that I would recommend against. So let me
Well,
pause
and
there
that's
for a second.
massive news. Like the function of GRC, especially in small to mid market, is coming out hot with the defense industrial base now needing to get on board with CMMC and that final rule coming out. More and more privacy laws coming into effect. And I think with all that coming in, especially at the MSP level, you would have a real big challenge if you tried to build a, a sort of widely acceptable and usable GRC program for multiple customers, let alone around a tool, right? And I think that goes for anything. I always want to build my tool around my process, not my process around my tool, right? Just from a can my team execute on this, like you were talking about? Here's all the functions we need and how we need them to work. But from a what if I decide I don't like that tool anymore? If I've built all the human capabilities around a tool, I'm very stuck at that point, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the exercise of documenting and maturing really does, especially in today's environment, it is require us to iteratively improve. Um, continuous improvement, just the only way to adapt to not only emerging risk technology, but the different demands that we see within the GRC organization. So I think jumping right in, I think some of the key values in the core tools, if we also have the expectation set on what we're going to actually use the tool for, then it also helps set expectations in the organization. And one of the drivers, not just to help build out requirements from a GRC solution perspective, but it was also a tool used to help demonstrate to stakeholders, like, why is it that you're saying to me you're having trouble using a GRC solution for policy publication, for example? So when you bring that out and you say, well, these are all the 50 steps it takes to do that, it really helps, I think, illustrate the complexity within the organization and within the functions, and it really helps communicate that out. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. So that tool, like Joe said, it's down there. Um, Download it, check it out, tweak it for your own needs. As you're looking at diving more into GRC, perhaps more into that customer's business, that's going to be a huge help. And Joe, I think you could repeat that for just about anything, like breaking down all the steps of your support triage process, right? So that sort of format, I was laughing in the background because I know it came from GRC because it's got 1.0 and 1.1, everything's sectioned. So it's real nicely organized. It's very much a GRC tool resource.
Absolutely, we do like to have things documented. It does help. So
Yeah,
we'll take
awesome.
that
Well,
as a
Joe,
compliment.
thanks so much for joining us. Any final thoughts you want to leave the audience with?
I think that I think that we, want to walk before we run. In our GRC organization, just probably like anywhere else. Um, I think that as we see, you know, as we try to right purpose or right fit solutions to what we're trying to accomplish. So one of the biggest values I do see leave this on a positive note is that continuity to regulations and industry frameworks. You mentioned CMMC and all the different types of ongoing activity that goes on in the industry. That linkage and alignment is so valuable to have in a technology, because maintaining that outside of it is difficult. So if you're looking for an investment in a GRC tool to better enable a practitioner, then that's the expectation. If you want a real solution that's holistic, that encompasses really good value add for collaboration and all the other things we talked about today, I recommend going back to the process like we just talked about, and kind of taking those steps first. And I really appreciate you inviting me here today and talking about a topic that I really love. And I think that is a really exciting topic. And we as the GRC area of our industry, our value is really getting seen, I think, and we're contributing more and more to the overall value proposition. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got the yellow circle from NIST and CIS. Governance is finally on the board, and it's so long overdue. Joe, thanks so much for joining us. I'm sure we'll have you back as this stuff evolves and we mature, and whatever new nonsense regulation comes out in cybersecurity. Just kidding, it's not nonsense, it's important. Let's jump right into the play of the day. All right. This was a really good episode, and I think Joe hit the nail on the head where the function of GRC in your trust and security practice really glues together all the stakeholders that need to keep a business moving. I'll give you great examples. We just did, like Joe said, some policy refreshes, and it was Joe's team that brought me and all the other 30, 40 stakeholders for a single policy and brought us to a landing where we were able to build and put out mature cybersecurity policy here at PAX 8. The other piece I think we need to take away is crawl, walk, run, right? Start with the process, understand your needs and your scope, and work your way into mature process, and then find tools that help drive that process the way it needs to be driven. So the TLDR of that is build your tool around your process, not your process around your tool. That's it.
Game over.
Oh man, I'm totally not used to the play of the day coming right back to me after I just talked. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Thanks again, Joe. We are taking next week off for Thanksgiving. So if you celebrate, please enjoy the holiday. If not, enjoy the day or two off that you're hopefully getting next week. In 2 weeks, we're going to have the Nick Ross on the show to talk about, well, really, whatever that guy wants to talk about, but really a bunch of innovations in Microsoft coming off the back of Ignite. It should really be exciting. So we'll see you in 2 Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Mountain.